An untamable beast, Mahoraga is easily comparable to the strongest characters in Jujutsu Kaisen, namely Gojo and Sukuna. He's been one of the most powerful entities of his universe throughout the entire history of Jujutsu Kaisen, and for the longest time has remained devoid of a master. This entity is a Shikigami, and as such can be summoned by a Jujutsu sorcerer from the Zenin clan who has inherited their family's 10 Shadows technique, such as Megami Fushiguro. But apart from Megami's divine dogs, each Shikigami has to lose to the user to submit to them, and based on how Mahoraga's ability works, it's nearly impossible for him to lose, resulting in Megami, or any Zenin from the past, being unable to tame him. This video has a lot of manga spoilers, so you've been warned. Anyways, the entity plays a significant role in the Shibuya arc and is one of the biggest reasons why Sukuna wins against Gojo in Shinjuku. In fact, Sukuna's obsession with Megami's potential has always been due to him having the 10 Shadows technique and, as a result, access to Mahoraga. But why is Mahoraga's nature the way that it is? What makes him so ridiculously powerful, and how does Sukuna and even Gojo overcome that? Let's discuss that and more in today's video. Who is Mahoraga, and what is his connection to Megami Fushiguro? To understand Mahoraga, we have to understand the inherited Jujutsu technique of the Zenin clan, the 10 Shadows technique, and by extension, what a Shikigami is. A Shikigami is a creature that often looks like an animal variant or the cursed spirit version of an animal. They can be conjured by a Jujutsu sorcerer whose technique revolves around summoning Shikigamis via a medium. In this case, Megami Fushiguro from the Zenin clan can use the very powerful inherited technique where he uses his hand signs, incantations, and shadows as a medium to summon a Shikigami in battle. Each Shikigami has different abilities. For example, his winged Shikigami Nue is capable of generating thunder, while his elephant Shikigami can release a burst of water. While the user is already gifted with 2 divine dogs, if they inherit the technique that is, they need to summon the other Shikigamis via an exorcism ritual and defeat them in order to make them submit. Once the Shikigamis are defeated, they can be summoned and used by the user whenever and however they please. Megami has managed to make 9 out of 10 Shikigamis subservient to him, but the last Shikigami, Mahoraga, or as he's known in Japanese, Makora, was nigh impossible to defeat. For this reason, Megami had the ability to summon it, guaranteeing him a win, but he would lose his life in the process. Mahoraga is the most uncontrollable Shikigami in history, precisely due to how powerful he is and how difficult it can be to beat him. For this reason, Gojo had spoken to Megami about one of the biggest battles among Jujutsu sorcerers being the one between a Limitless and Six Eyes users much like himself and a user of the 10 Shadows technique like Megami. With the battle having ended with both sorcerers killing each other, it was proven that a user of the 10 Shadows technique could go toe-to-toe with someone as powerful as Gojo. But of course, they would need to use Mahoraga for that. The Shikigami can be summoned when the user recites the terms, "With this treasure I summon," as they make a hand signal and take the name of the overpowered divine general. The Shikigami manifests into a towering figure with an opaque white humanoid and muscular body. Something akin to wings protrude from its eyes, while above its head is an 8-handled wheel that spins from time to time. This wheel is easily the primary reason behind Mahoraga having tremendous motion and being nearly invincible, as the wheel turns amidst battle while adapting to its opponent's techniques and attacks. If Mahoraga's opponent uses the same technique again, the Divine General will counter it easily. It allows Mahoraga to adapt to every single phenomena, which is why no Zenin has been able to take control of it before, because how do you defeat something whose entire shtick is to adapt and become immune to your abilities? It was always used as a last resort by a Zenin amidst battle, as they fought with the mindset of sacrificing their own lives, but also taking their enemy down with it. This ability to adapt is why Sukuna takes a great interest in Megami, as he wishes to use Mahoraga for the sake of adapting to Gojo's infinity, allowing his attacks to reach the Limitless user. If someone manages to defeat and tame Mahoraga, the sorcerer can wear the 8-handled wheel and partake in battle, while Mahoraga adapts without having to be summoned and take any attack on himself. The attacks are intercepted by the sorcerer, and the wheel links the user to the Shikigami, allowing the latter to analyze and adapt the opponent's techniques accordingly. Once the process is completed, Mahoraga can be summoned and used to counter the opponent with relative ease. What's strange here is that the only person to ever tame Mahoraga is not a Zenin, but Sukuna himself. The Zenin have only ever summoned it using an exorcism ritual which will end with their deaths. Megami is often seen almost summoning Mahoraga as the Shikigami is his last resort in battle. Gojo calls him out on this as Megami is always willing to sacrifice his life in any battle, almost summoning Mahoraga to turn the tides in his favor. He's seen trying to use it a lot across the series, such as when Sukuna is reborn within Itadori in the pilot episode, when Megami fights a 3-finger Sukuna which ends with Itadori's temporary death, against Hanami during the the exchange event, against the special grade curse during the Death Painting's Wu Mark, against the Seance Toji in Shibuya, and he finally ends up using it against Haruta, which is strange because out of all people, Mahoraga was summoned against someone like Haruta. A Zenin can include others in the ritual, bringing forth the Divine General with their opponent in the ritual, ensuring that the opponent is forced to battle the Shikigami and they die in the process. This technique was probably used in the ancient battle between the members of the Gojo clan and the Zenin, resulting in both sorcerers dying. Megumi would have and should have died in Shibuya after this, with Mahoraga severely injuring him with a single strike and putting him in a state of suspended death. However, Megumi was saved as Sukuna arrived to fight and tame the Shikigami for his personal needs, eventually ending the ritual. Mahoraga's abilities. Adaptability like no other. Let's start with his wheel, the Dharma wheel, which we have already covered briefly for convenience. This wheel, alongside the Furu's incantation of the 10 sacred treasures, represents harmony and a perfect cycle. The adaptations performed by Mahoraga can be of several types. For starters, it can be defensive, allowing the Shikigami to become physically immune to the attack. At first, it heals the previous injuries incurred from the attack, and then the wheel spins, allowing Mahoraga to procure a body that does not take damage from the repeated attack. Then, the adaptation can also be offensive, which allows Mahoraga to counter the opponent's attack with his own, which negates the attack meant for him. For example, Mahoraga adapted to Gojo's Infinity at some point and allowed Sukuna, who was using the tamed Divine General, to slash through space. And finally, there's auxiliary adaptability, where the Divine General begins to see attacks that are normally invisible. This is seen during his fight against Sukuna in Shibuya, where initially, Mahoraga is unable to see Sukuna's slashes, but with time, the animation begins to include the pattern of the slashes, showing that Mahoraga is slowly adapting to dismantle and cleave, and as a result, has acquired the ability to see the previously invisible attacks. The adaptation can progress and get better with more spins, and the more of the same attack he intercepts, the faster the process gets. Following which, Mahoraga can still continue to adapt to a technique it has already negated and come up with different counters, making the Shikigami insanely versatile. However, just because Mahoraga can adapt does not exactly make it intelligent, since it's not as sentient as an intelligent curse or a human. Its ability to analyze and attack is purely based on the technique it possesses. However, when tamed, Mahoraga shows some smarts as he protects the user of his own accord. One of the Shikigami's most prominent features is his sword, which is known as the Sword of Extermination. This weapon is attached to Mahoraga's arm and is somewhat different in comparison to other cursed weapons. For example, Slaughter Demon or Playful Cloud are concentrated with cursed energy, which is negative energy. On the other hand, Mahoraga's Sword of Extermination is concentrated with positive energy, similar to reversed curse energy, which makes it a natural counter against curses and cursed spirits. However, he could adapt to make it use negative energy as well, which is something he did against Sukuna in Shibuya. Mahoraga was even able to deflect Sukuna's slashes at some point once he began to adapt to it. When it comes to raw power, Mahoraga naturally has the standard abilities such as enhanced strength, speed, durability, and the like. It is the strongest Shikigami of the 10 Shadows technique, so that only makes sense. Mahoraga also has regeneration like Sukuna and those who can use reversed curse technique to heal themselves, such as Gojo and Yuta. He can even regenerate from wounds that have cut off his head. During the Shinjuku showdown between Gojo and Sukuna, Mahoraga acquired the ability of spatial manipulation and durability negation, as Sukuna used him to adapt to Limitless and counter Infinity. With that, Sukuna was able to target space, existence, and the world itself, instead of something tangible or cursed. Using his new slash, also known as the World-Cutting Slash, Sukuna was able to slice through Gojo, killing him after splitting him horizontally in two. Because Infinity was a void that slowed down any oncoming attack and did not allow it to reach Gojo, Sukuna used Mahoraga to adapt and cut through existence itself instead of Gojo's physical body. Gojo being split in two was just intended collateral damage. Mahoraga is conditionally invulnerable, as he can defensively adapt to attacks and phenomena, becoming completely immune to them in the process. He was able to adapt through Sukuna's techniques of slashing, especially Dismantle, which is why Sukuna had to open his domain, cut him down constantly without giving him the time to adapt, and incinerate him with his fire-based arrow attack and more pyrotechnics, incinerating the entity to the point of exorcising him. Long story short, Mahoraga can only be defeated in one fell swoop before he gets the opportunity to adapt. Sukuna vs. Mahoraga, Shibuya's most explosive battle. As mentioned before, Megumi performs an exorcism ritual to summon Mahoraga against Haruta and nearly sacrifices himself in the process. On the other hand, Jogo had fed Itadori several Sukuna fingers, giving the King of Curses temporary control over Itadori's body. However, Sukuna's primary goal was to swap from Itadori's body to Megumi's, After gaining the power of all his fingers, because A. Megami, as a Zenin, could be a vessel, but unlike Itadori, would not be able to take control over his body, and B. he needed Megami as his vessel to use Mahoraga against Gojo and bypass infinity. Naturally, he needed to tame Mahoraga and prevent Megami from dying for his purpose. With Mahoraga being summoned, Sukuna reached the scene in a second and engaged in a duel with the Divine General. It began with Sukuna using Dismantle against the Shikigami, but anytime he would land substantial blows on Mahoraga, he would see the wheel over its head spin, allowing the Shikigami to regenerate in an instant and become immune to the attack. Mahoraga also went from being at a disadvantage due to Sukuna's Dismantle to switching from positive energy to cursed energy, which sent Sukuna crashing through numerous buildings. With this, Mahoraga ended up adapting to Dismantle and began to visualize Sukuna's slashes. So, Sukuna began to use Cleave, which required him to touch his target to adjust his energy accordingly. Unlike the versatile Dismantle, Cleave can only be used on those who have cursed energy, and the user has to make physical contact with the target instead of sending flying slashes at them. Cleave did end up inflicting damage on Mahoraga, but the wheel turned again, allowing Sukuna to confirm Mahoraga's ability to adapt to all phenomena, comparing his technique to cheating at a game of rock, paper, scissors. Ultimately, Sukuna expanded his domain and trapped Mahoraga in the Malevolent Shrine, where he didn't need to touch his target to launch Cleave. Instead, he could turn the domain into a shredder and slice down Mahoraga, exercising him without giving him the opportunity to adapt. Now, Sukuna's domain was such that instead of creating an innate domain, it painted a domain on the outside with the sky as the canvas. In short, it was an external domain, and Sukuna could extend its size up to a 200-meter radius. With Megami's presence in Shibuya and to keep him alive, Sukuna created a 140-meter radius and launched his attack, cutting and slicing everything within it, be it Mahoraga, buildings, or even civilians. The slashing was relentless within the domain, and the hits were guaranteed on his main target, while the Shikigami constantly tried to regenerate. However, the slashing was too quick for Mahoraga to keep up with. Sukuna had to use a technique alien to his opponent to take him down before he could adapt. However, while Mahoraga had completely adapted to Dismantle, he had also been exposed to Cleave. This meant that he had a certain level of adaptation to Cleave, requiring Sukuna to pull out his final move of Fuga, which allowed him to use fire on his target. He used it right before Mahoraga's regeneration was complete and managed to become the only person to ever tame the Divine General, incinerating him before he could adapt and regenerate. Sukuna using Mahoraga, Shinjuku Showdown, and the fall of Gojo Satoru. Back in Season 1, Sukuna and Yuji had made a binding vow, with Sukuna allowing Yuji to leave in exchange for passing control to him whenever he uttered the word enchain. However, part of the vow was also for Yuji to forget about the details. It is in the Culling Games arc when we see the aftermath of the vow. As the word enchain is uttered by Sukuna, Yuji has no choice but to pass control to him, following which the King of Curses transfers all of his powers into one of his fingers and force feeds it to Megami, taking control over his body. With Megami as his new vessel, Sukuna gets access to the 10 Shadows technique, and having defeated Mahoraga in the past, Sukuna is now the very first person to ever tame the Shikigami. In this new form, Sukuna first uses Mahoraga against Yorozu as he utilizes the adaptation ability to counter his construction technique, which she uses to create something from nothing using her cursed energy. By the time Yorozu expands her domain and threatens to hit Sukuna with True Sphere, Sukuna has already summoned Mahoraga to use his ability and switched places with it. Mahoraga destroys True Sphere even though the technique is supposed to be untouchable. He also lands a slash across Yorozu's chest and causes her domain to collapse. However, things only get real in Shinjuku, where Sukuna fights Gojo, the very man who had caused him to tame Mahoraga and switch to Megumi's body. The greatest sorcerer in history and the greatest sorcerer of the present fight one another, engaging in domain clash after domain clash. Throughout it, Sukuna uses the 10 Shadows technique so that Megumi's soul is burdened with having to adapt to unlimited void via Mahoraga. So, by the 5th clash of their domains, Mahoraga has adapted to Gojo's unlimited void and rescues Sukuna from there. The next thing Sukuna has to adapt to is infinity, and this time he makes his own soul bear the burden of adaptation instead of Megumi's, as he wears the Dharma wheel on his head while engaging in a sequence of close quarters hand-to-hand combat against Gojo. With Limitless being extremely complicated, the wheel has to turn 5 times until Sukuna and Mahoraga Mahoraga adapt to the technique. Soon after, Sukuna collapses, and Mahoraga appears after adapting to both Cursed Technique Lapse, Blue, and Infinity. The Shikigami's cursed energy alters itself in a way that it can negate Infinity on contact. As a result, he pulls Gojo down into Sukuna's shadow and slashes him across the shoulder using his sword. With Sukuna regaining consciousness, he begins to take advantage of the parts where Mahoraga would neutralize Infinity and finally summons merged beast Agito for a 3-against-1 against Gojo. Eventually, the wheel spins for the 6th time, and Mahoraga's adaptation to Infinity gets even stronger. It launches a slashing attack targeted towards space, existence, and the world as a whole instead of his tangible target. With this attack, Gojo's right arm is sliced clean off. Gojo then destroys Agito, restores his arm using reversed curse technique, and lands a black flash on the Shikigami before launching another one. While Gojo is eventually able to use Hollow Purple to destroy Mahoraga, the purpose of the Shikigami has been achieved. Ultimately, Sukuna uses the Dimension World Slash to cut through the space around Gojo and splits him into two, killing the Limitless user in a grave turn of events. Marvelous verdict! What's interesting here is back when Yuji had asked Gojo if he would lose to a fully powered Sukuna, Gojo said that he was gonna win. Things obviously didn't turn out that way, but that's not due to Gojo not being strong enough. Gojo essentially fought a 2v1 against the strongest sorcerer from the Golden Age of Jujutsu and the most powerful entity of the Jujutsu world, and then a 3v1 with Agito joining the party. And yet, he managed to go head-to-head with Sukuna and exercise both Agito and Mahoraga. Sukuna was probably aware of the fact that even if fully powered, Infinity would become the reason he would lose to Gojo, so his only way out was by finding a way to counter Infinity. As we can see, none of this would have been possible without Mahoraga. With that, today's video comes to an end. Did you like it? We want to hear your thoughts on Mahoraga in the comments section down below. This is Wheezy249 signing off, but you can always find me on Twitch. Until next time, thanks for watching, stay safe out there, and have a marvelous day.